Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm Kathy, and this season is dedicated to exploring the unique world of raising boys. Parenting boys today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code, a mystery, especially when it comes to understanding their inner emotional world. Together, we'll dive into real life stories, share practical tips, and uncover insights to help you and your son thrive, not just survive. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unlock the parenting code, one boy at a time. Welcome back to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm your host, Kathy, and today I'm excited to welcome Laura Vosika. Laura is an accomplished author, musician, publisher, and mother of 9 children, including 7 boys. She's best known for her time travel adventure series, The Bluebells Chronicles, and is the founder of Gabriel's Horn Press, as well as co-host for the Books and Brews podcast. But beyond her creative work, Laura brings a powerful voice to parenting, one shaped by raising a large family, lively, learning firsthand how deeply boys and girls differ at their core. With decades of lived experience, Laura brings a refreshing honesty about the unique nature of boys, their energy, their simplicity, and what it takes to guide them into strong, emotionally grounded men. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So, raising 9 children, 7 of which are boys, is not an experience that many of us have. So, can you kind of
Right.
just, put us as that fly on the wall as in the early years when you first had 9 children under your roof? What was that like as
Well,
motherhood and all of that?
right. I obviously didn't start off with 9. So I had a boy, a girl, a boy, a girl, then a boy, twin boys, and another boy. And so I didn't have 9 until the oldest was, I believe, about 15, maybe. And at that point, I've often told people raising 9 children, believe it or not, is easier than raising 3 or 4 in some ways. And because when you have 3 or 4, they might all be young at once. You're the only one there to take care of all of them. Whereas when you have 9, okay, they're little kids, they're middle kids, they're big kids. If you've done a halfway decent job of showing these babies as a positive thing, in my case, the older kids loved having younger brothers and sisters. In fact, they kept asking long after I was divorced, can we have another baby? And I'm like, doesn't work like that, guys.
Mm.
So they enjoyed being with their younger siblings, probably not all the time, I'm sure, but they would want to hold the baby, feed the baby. They would play together. When you have, say, 4 or 5 kids, even if they're young, they're all playing together, as opposed to when you have only 1 or 2, they might be looking to you for entertainment. So, a fly on the wall, I think the best descriptor might be one day there was an article being written about me in the Minneapolis Star Tribune quite a few years ago. And so the reporter and the photographer came early. I believe it was the photographer. And he kind of talked about how, the boys sort of come running from everywhere and get some of them off to school, get some of them off to wherever, get lunches ready, and then it's settling down to writing. Now, when some of them were not yet in school, they would go out. We had a fully fenced backyard, and we had a nice area that was devoid of grass, which I know is a horror to some people. But in our case, the boys loved it because they would move the dirt around. They would build their, not sand piles, but dirt piles. They would run their Tonka trucks up and down the hills. And they were right outside my window. I could see them, I could hear them. The yard was fully fenced. On another day, let's say, Minnesota's cold in the winter, can't just toss them outside. They might be having a Nerf gun battle around me. So I'd be sitting at my table working on my novel, and I'd have Nerf gun bullets flying past me and boys running around me and past me. And they were having a great time. I knew where they were. If they were outside, the yard was fully fenced. I knew where they were. They could play upstairs, downstairs. They could play all around me, and it didn't bother me. And, as to something like dinner, I was teaching music lessons at the time. So I would often start the day by just throwing everything in the crock pot, turn it on, and it would be ready for dinner when I came home. And so that was a fairly easy way of also feeding a big family. So that's a little about what a day might be like.
So, Laura, what about your family dynamics? Like when you were growing up, did you have a lot of siblings yourself?
I don't consider I did. A lot of people consider four a large family. So I had three sisters. It never really felt like having three sisters in a way, though, because there were two of us who were older. There was about a 9 year gap, and then there were two who were younger, much younger. And so it was kind of like my mother raised a family of two and then raised another family of two. My oldest sister, I think she was gone by the time the youngest one was a
Mm.
year and a half or 2 years old. So it wasn't four of us for very long, but
Okay,
all
and
sisters, no boys.
into like I'm from a family of six and five
Hmm.
girls and one boy, and I was right in the
Uh-huh.
middle. So that whole um, like birth order and the gender order, all of that can play a very interesting part in family dynamics. So that's kind of what I was interested to know about your own background. So
Hmm.
the other thing that I have to ask, because I love the image of having a large family and still being able to create that time for yourself to do something either that you're passionate about or you know that you need to do. And I think many of us f can easily fall into that pattern of the to-do list. Well, I've got to get the laundry done. I have to get this out, and it's never ending. Like you will never get to the end
Right.
of that list. So, how did you kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but to give yourself grace to decide what your priorities were. And one of those priorities was based on what you needed, not that everything you were doing was as the head
Right.
of the family.
I think that they sort of go together because I was raised in a situation where my mother decided at some point she was going to have a beautiful, clean house. Well, she ended up just being very stressed. There were probably other things going on too, but in this attempt to always have the house perfect and clean, she was just frustrated and she would yell. And it wasn't a very pleasant place to be. It didn't matter how clean the house was if your mother is always angry and unhappy. And so to me, part of the goal was I want these kids to be happy in this house. I want, family love to be the priority, not a spotless house. And so I tried to balance that. And, did I go too far in either direction? I don't know. But I tried to teach the kids chores from the very start. So my mother, with two of us, I think anybody who's a parent knows that kids don't just automatically love doing chores, especially if you only start asking them or telling them to when they're 8 or 9 or 10 years old and it's a sudden change. And so for my mother, she expected us to do the dishes every night. Well, of course, being kids and not having been asked to do that before, we didn't necessarily make it easy for her. And so with two of us, she could get angry and do it herself. Whereas with nine, that doesn't work. There's no way you can do all of this. So the kids, I asked them to help from the start. When they're 2 years old, here, put the spoon in the drawer. And okay, if they get it in the wrong slot, let's not worry about that. It's just teaching them the idea that we're a family and we work together and we play together. And if we work together, doing what you can at your age, it doesn't have to be anything big, then we can all be more relaxed and happier, and nobody feels like they're doing all the work for everybody. And then, of course, the second thing was, and don't demand perfection. Realize your house is probably never going to be perfectly clean. when you have a large family. I mean, I know a large family who did remarkably with having the house very neat and clean, at least anytime we were bringing them meals. So when I brought them meals when my daughter was sick, it would always be neat and clean. Um, but I think you have to set the priority of how do you want the kids to feel about living in the house and then do your best. And at a certain point, the kids just decided on their own to do their own laundry because 9 kids, there are piles and piles of laundry. You can't stay on top of it. And so they just started doing their own, getting it into their own room, problem solved. And they did that on their own.
So because of growing up, but not as many as nine, there were six of us, but
Mm-hmm.
we very definitely were initiated into, the team effect kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember very clearly that there would be every week that it would change slightly, but there was a paper taped up over the sink, which with everybody's job for that week and rotated,
Mm-hmm.
trying to be fair. But I do remember very clearly that I used to feel some of the things were unfair, like because we had a boy in the middle. And it was like all of a sudden he got to take the garbage out, but he wasn't asked to do the dishes. And there were a few things like that. It didn't last long because, we were strong sisters. And so
Mm-hmm.
it ended up being more equalized. But I remember the expectations of my parents, which is just the time,
Mm-hmm.
was there were some things that the girls did that it wasn't going to be the same as the man's role and the woman's role.
Right.
So the majority, like seven of your children were boys. So my
Mm-hmm.
guess is, or tell me, was there any pushback or reaction, or it was just kind of like, this is what has to be done. Everyone does their own, what they can do.
I think it was more of the latter. So, for instance, dishes, myself and 2 girls, even, well, our dishwasher kept breaking. And one of those was because the twins, when they were quite young, which, I forgive them for, they didn't know any better, they put a baking sheet with that much lard covering the bottom of it into the dishwasher. There went that dishwasher. I later found out it had to do with the way the piping had been installed, that everything caught. And but I finally gave up on dishwashers after the fourth one and said, we're just going to have to do these by hand. Well, 2 girls and myself, there's no way we can keep up with that many dishes. And so I would try and switch it up. Okay, you do the plates, you do the silverware and cups, you do, or everybody has to do 15 dishes today, or, everybody has to do 25. So they all did the dishes, they all did their own laundry. Um, I think that some of them, my younger daughter tended more to do the cooking, which she seemed to enjoy. They all like baking. Well, most of the boys, I think, like baking. So, in a way, it was fairly equal, but there was also the instance where one of my sons especially liked building and repairing. And so he just sort of naturally took that on from the time he was about 12 or 13, by which point I was divorced. And so I think he saw himself a little bit as the man of the house, taking care of stuff, but he knew what he was doing. He would go on YouTube, he would research it. One day he was 13, I think he was 13, but he looked much younger. And we thought he might have broken his leg. So he was on crutches. And I was pushing him on one of those flat trolleys through Home Depot, and he was
Mhm.
going to repair a step from the kitchen into the garage. And he found the employees and he's telling them, I need this, I need this, I need this. And people were just so amused because they thought he was about 8 or 9,
Mm.
but he knew what he was doing. He knew what he needed. And he liked doing that sort of thing. He replaced a bathroom vanity for me, including the plumbing. I think he was 15 when he did that, maybe only 14, but he enjoyed it. And he would sort of naturally just have the drain in the basement like to clog up. he would always go down and snake that out. And I think I told you the story about my daughter and I going to Joanne Fabric to get a button to sew on his pants. And the woman told us, oh, boys can sew too. And we said, yes, they can. But then he'll make us snake out the laundry room. And all of us are happy with this arrangement. And if you're happy with it, that's fine. And he's quite capable of sewing a button on if he needs to do it himself. We're quite capable of snaking out a drain if we need to. But that arrangement worked for all of us.
Yeah, there's kind of a beauty when children are allowed to be able to pursue whatever they're passionate about. And just
Right.
as we can put barriers on things connected with gender, we can also stop things that, are a natural, like that's his natural thing. He's passionate about it.
Exactly.
But if
Mhm.
we put the binders on because, well, the daughters should be able to do this too, then it just kind of takes some of the natural tendencies, the natural passion out of it.
Right.
So that sounds
And if
pretty.
my daughter had wanted to build and repair things, I would have been all for that. She tended to like cooking, and she especially, I think, really liked cooking for her younger brothers when she was an adult and living with me. That's what she enjoyed doing. And it just worked out well for
Yeah.
all of us to just sort of follow what we like to do.
Okay. There's a lot of things that I do want to get to, but I want to make sure I don't miss anything that that I
Mhm.
intentionally wanted to touch. So I'm going to move to another thing just for a moment because when I was thinking about you and your character and your passion and music being such an important part of your world. And so I was wondering, especially, well, when the children were growing up, how much was music part of the world that they lived in? Like, I'm kind of asking that because like I've always loved music, but it was my husband, his world is kind of music and he had his own band. He was the lead singer and the his nieces had their own bluegrass band that ended up being quite like they made a few CDs and so music was really part of our world. And from the youngest, like before our son was really talking, fluidly. He would be setting up our stage in the living room and he would be saying, mommy's going to do this, on the
Yeah.
drums and daddy's on the guitar and I've got the microphone and we would have concerts. But it was our
Hmm.
whole world, I will
Yeah.
say, really revolved around all things music. So I was really curious to know about your family.
I I think that they have liked having a lot of music in their lives. Now, here's an interesting story. I majored in music, as I think I talked to you about earlier, and my major instrument was trombone, but I also played multiple other wind instruments. We had a piano in the house. Later, I had a harp. Then I had three because that's how it goes. And so when the kids were very young, I would practice a lot. So they'd be playing with their Legos or trucks or whatever on the living room floor. And I would either be playing piano or flute or trombone. And I would literally sometimes be standing there when the older ones were pretty young, trying to keep the slide up. And they'd be playing around my feet. And if they jumped up, I'd be careful of the slide. Don't hit the slide. And then I played in the Buzz Whiteley Big Band out in Paulsbo, Washington. So their dad would bring them to the concerts when we had the concerts in the park, things like that. And so they were exposed to a lot of music. And now my oldest son, when I was pregnant with him, I was working on the song from Cats, Memory. And so I played it a lot while I was pregnant with him. And he was born in Ireland, where I rarely had access to a piano. So we got back to the States when he was 3 months old. And I sat down and started playing Memory on the piano. His head shot up. He was, on his stomach on his blanket. His head shot up. He looked right at me and he got the biggest smile on his face. And you could tell he knew that song,
Yeah.
even though he'd been in the womb when he last heard it more than 3 months prior. In fact, I flew there when it was probably 5 months since he'd heard it. Um, and he ended up being just very talented. He can sit down and play a piece by ear on piano, even something he hasn't heard in 5 years. He'll sit down and he'll just start playing by ear, both hands, melody,
Mm.
harmony. My daughter plays so he plays piano and cello. My first daughter plays cello, piano. I made her play trombone so she could be in the marching band, which she didn't continue with trombone, but I think marching band was a good experience for her. My next son down plays a bit of piano. He played trombone all through high school. So all of them have played an instrument, and a couple of them really didn't like playing an instrument, but they liked to sing. And so they would always be in the choir. And for me, you asked, what do we do for ourselves? And I wanted to add, I think there is an element of take care of yourself, as in put on your own oxygen mask first, so that you don't become this stressed out, angry mother. And for me, it was perfect because I taught music lessons. And so I taught about 25 hours a week, and we mostly arranged it, especially when the kids were young and couldn't be left home alone. We always worked around each other's schedules. So when my husband was home, I was at work teaching, and it was just something I loved to do. So not only was I making pretty good money per hour to help support this large family, it was like a vacation every day I went to work, because I'd be sitting there playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with an 8-year-old and thinking, I can't believe they're paying me to have fun. So for me, it was that. And then, of course, later on, there was writing. And writing, well, I would do it after the kids went to school, while they were playing in the backyard where I could see and hear them. If a student didn't show up, I would work on editing or writing in the half hour that I should have been teaching their lesson. And then at one point, I just stayed up till 1 in the morning writing, and I still had the energy to do it, and then get up at 6 again at that point. But that's how music was part of their lives, and also how I sort of had things that I loved doing.
It's beautiful. I my roots are Irish and Scottish, and when I was a young woman, the last place that I lived in Canada was Vancouver for 6 years before leaving the country. And I worked part-time. I was in daycare, but daycare doesn't pay very well at all. And
Right.
so I took a weekend job waitressing at a place called the Blarney Stone. And they had live musicians come from Ireland and play on the weekends. And I remember that's one of my best social eras that I can remember. And one of the things that it just was such a it resonated so deeply with me is the music was always, beautiful, but often on Sundays there would be gatherings for some of the people that worked there because you got very close with the musicians, and
Mhm.
they would have these kind of impromptu. I can't remember what is it called, a ceilidh or a
I, I want to say there's another word. Kaylee might be the right word if you're talking about a dance, sort of an
well,
impromptu
it,
dance.
it wasn't a dance. It's like everybody would sit in a circle. And anyone
Mhm.
who had an instrument, it was like a jam session, but that's not what they
Right,
called it.
right. The word isn't coming to mind. I was that one when my husband and I were in Orkney, and it was amazing. And they're a little bit different from jam sessions.
Yeah.
And I can't place a finger. There's a different quality to it. And I think you're right that there is a name, but it's not coming to mind.
Well, what impressed me the most was, first of all, was the pure love of music and the
Yes.
communal part of it. And
Mhm.
it was like there was no embarrassment. Like that was my big, I was terrified the first time I went to one of those that someone was going to say, "Oh, you sing." Because everybody, would say, "Oh, come on, Tommy." And he would burst out in song, even if he was reluctant to do it. And there was such
Right.
a fear of embarrassing myself to do that. But I didn't feel that maybe because of the circle they were in. But even like we
Mhm.
traveled to Ireland once, do the typical try to find your roots kind of thing.
Mhm.
And still, like music was what we resonated with the most everywhere. And,
Mhm.
and so thinking that
Well,
you're, sorry,
it's a universal language,
yeah.
and it's one that no matter where you go in the world. Now, this is rather interesting. When I was playing in the Chinese music ensemble, I started doing some research, and I think that was part of my husband and I had started a book called The Theology of Music, which we need to get back to. And in the process of researching for that book, I discovered that there is a strong connection of all things between Chinese and the Scots and Irish music. For instance, they both tend to leave out, I believe it's the fourth and seventh tones that both of them leave out. And it's been a long time since I researched it, but I thought it was fascinating. And so they could go into each other's worlds, and the music would probably be fairly familiar to them. But anywhere you go, you can appreciate music. If you play a violin, you can play it anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the things. I had kind of a list of things in my own mind that was really important to me in our child growing up, and music was a core, like a core value that I wanted to. And it wasn't that he needed to play an instrument or be a
Mm-hmm.
musician or anything, just that he understand the power of loving music because
Right.
it's a gift. It is a gift to know that.
Well,
Um,
and it puts such beauty in our lives too.
Yes. Well, but it can do so much. Like it is such a powerful, like really a powerful tool. There's so much healing that can happen.
Yes.
It can regulate emotions. It can kind of stir up
Mm-hmm.
it's such a powerful tool.
Yes. Yes. Are you familiar with Plato's theories about the different modes of music and what they do?
No, no, I'm not.
It's a very well, it goes back to Plato, obviously, but he had this whole philosophy that presumably works in real life, where there are seven modes. One starts on the C, all the white keys of the piano. One starts on the D, but all the white keys. So it's I should know this. The major scale starts on one. It's Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. Aeolian is the minor scale on the sixth. And I forgot what starts on the seventh. But he went through, and Dorian, I'm making this up because I don't remember, but for example, if you play music in the Dorian mode, it might inspire men to war. If you play it in a different mode, it
Mm.
might inspire men to peace and calm. If you play it in a different mode, it's going to have different effect. And then there's the whole, this is fascinating, the theory today we use our A is set to 440 beats per minute cycles. I forget the terminology, but some people say that it should be 434. And then that's a much more healing set of harmonies in the body. And that A440 is actually damaging to the body. I think I got that right, 443. Anyway, again, it's a very fascinating theory on how sound and music does impact not only our emotions, but our physical being.
Yeah, I did a little bit of my son was interested in music therapy at one point, like when he was trying to just, all the options on the table kind of thing. And so I looked into it a little bit more. And again, just the power of it is quite
Yes.
an amazing, yeah, yeah. So that's a whole other world. But I think people who have that feel for music, and I think it can really enrich your life and help you manage. and experience your emotions in a deeper way. So I think it's a very important
Yeah.
thing that children understand.
Right. I absolutely do.
So we had talked a little bit before, but I wanted to bring it up again, talking about raising children. So you grew up in the 70s. I grew up a little bit earlier, but we both talked about a time, and if I remember for myself correctly, it was in the 80s, at the end of the 70s into the 80s. And that was the time that the thought was boys and girls are equal. And if we, you know, give them the same environments, if we expose them and allow them to experience the same things, that, you know, mankind will be better. So the little boys, if they want to come in with the barrettes in their hair, if they want to, you know, put on
Right.
the nail polish, if they want to play with the dolls, if the little girls want to use the hammer and nails, like just
Hmm.
so I'll stop there. But our conversation after that is what I'd like to bring into this one.
Right. Well, for me, it was the era of the Free to Be You and Me program, and William Has a Doll, I think was the name of the movie or the book or whatever it was. And that was really making its round in schools. And the idea was, I don't really want to say equality. It was more that if you give them all the same exact set of toys, they'll equally divide, and that it's only because we raise girls to like dolls that they do, or that we raise boys to like trucks that they do. And so for me, I was more of a tomboy. I hated dolls. I still do. I really don't know why I hate dolls so much, but I really, really dislike them. It's probably, I don't know, psychological trauma from something I don't remember. Um, I just didn't like dolls. I was happy playing with the Tonka truck with my cousin out in the backyard. I was happy playing trombone. Now I liked wearing dresses too, but I was more of a tomboy. And so maybe that's part of why I believed it also, just because I was told it all the time. And my parents did give us things like Matchbox cars, even though they only had girls. I liked my stuffed animals, didn't like Barbies, hated them. And so here's my first son. I had never had brothers, and we didn't even have a TV. And all of a sudden, here he is, about 18 months old, turning things into a gun. And it was a shock to me. Like, I didn't expose him to guns. I don't own one. We never talked about them. My husband at the time was from Ireland, where guns aren't even legal. And so to this day, I don't know how, but it was like there was this boy instinct to turn things into weapons, to play soldier and cowboy or whatever. And then my girls came along. So seven girls, two boys. And one of my daughters is much more of a tomboy. She's still rides horses, in fact, does tricks on horseback. And she's she's high energy, but it's different. And so if I called the kids for dinner, she would come running in and jump onto the bench with lots of energy. But the boys, it's just like popcorn exploding all over the house and bursting into the kitchen and just almost slide in like to home plate. It's just a different energy. And it's hard to describe it beyond that, but if you experience it, you'll go, wow. Or even, let's say, when my sister was playing basketball, my older sister, she was drafted onto the team because she was tall. And I played in pep bands. So I saw both boys and girls basketball. Again, there's just a different energy. You know, the boys, they're out for blood. And the girls, it's almost like, excuse me, you know, maybe not to that extent, and maybe not now, 30 years down the line, but there was a different energy to it that I don't think anybody can deny who's watched both boys and girls basketball.
Yeah, I agree. And even, you know, I think anybody or the time period that was trying to make sense of things and saying, you know, it's It's what we're doing, and it's the environment that we're creating. And because I worked in daycare, we were considered to be very progressive because we were in a co-op, and we had this attitude about children and provided the environments. But especially when I had a son and my best friend had a daughter, almost the same age. And we both had kind of bought into this. So, provide the home environment that has the options, so that they make the choices. And although there were some things, like because our son was an only child, I made sure that, you know, every Christmas he got a baby doll because he
Hmm.
wanted a brother and or a sister, but he wanted to have a sibling. And so I made sure that he had pets and he had these baby dolls. And he cared for those baby dolls just as well, if not better, than, his female counterpart. But inevitably, there was a natural draw. He would go for what would be stereotypically boys' toys, and
Hmm.
the little girl, his best friend, would gravitate towards the other. Like there was some overlap in some of it, but it just became so evident. And that was maybe the beginning of kind of really getting it. There are
Hmm.
differences between our
Yep.
boys and girls. Um, Another one is connected with that. I wonder if you'll talk about based on because you've got a wealth of information, having this many children in a group
Right.
and, being with them constantly and just knowing them intimately. So one of the things that surprised me was the depth of differences in communication and
Hmm.
especially conflict. So how two boys would deal with conflict compared with two girls. So when there's, and I would assume in a large household, from personal experience, I would assume that there are conflicts between siblings.
Right. Right. And I would say, I think I'll stick to saying, I think that the stereotypes are very true that boys are much more likely to have a fist fight and then go have a beer together, whatever a boy would have, not a beer, but whereas girls, I think, are more likely to take things very personally, to kind of hold on to that. And I can see that in my boys, that even in cases where they and I have had some conflict, we move on. We're fine. Whereas on the other side, not so much. It takes a lot more letting things settle, hoping it works out. Um, it's much more emotional. I would just say the stereotypes are very true.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. So keeping with stereotypes, you had mentioned when your boys were in school. So I
Hmm.
don't know the details. I don't think we talked about the details, but you had said that two of your boys they ended up being on Ritalin. So I wanted to
Hmm.
talk a little bit about what it was like as the mom, connected with especially their early years, younger years in elementary school experiences.
Right. Well, they were different to begin with. Not saying that in a bad way. Um, Little escape artists, for starters, which none of my other kids had ever done. And so, for instance, when this particular one was 2.5, they kept getting out of the house. So we installed this flip latch that was way up, at the height of maybe my head or almost above my head, and I'm 5'6". It took us 3 days of researching locks. It took us, an hour to run to the store and buy it, another half hour to find all the tools and install it. probably within 15 minutes, this little smarty pants had shoved a stool over, got a flat handled spatula. It was a metal spatula with a very flat handle, climbed up on the stool, stuck it under there, and flipped it open. And this is a lock that a lot of adults actually have trouble because you have to lift it up the tiniest bit and then flip it. It took us basically 3 days to put it in. It took him 15 minutes to figure it out. Same thing with the bike lock, where he was into the food all the time to the point I'm like, this isn't healthy. There has to be some restraint. So we put a bike lock on the refrigerator, and I figured he's 2. I don't need to switch all the numbers. I can just leave the last one set to the wrong number, make it easy on the rest of us. He figured it out. And so for weeks, I was saying to the older kids, quit leaving it open. And they kept all of them insisting. And when there are 8 other kids, how do you know? And I finally came around the corner and I saw him twist, test, twist, test, twist, open. He was 2. So you take that and you put them in school where they're expected suddenly to sit still for hours a day. It's not a good combination. And I think we're maybe getting back to the idea that boys can be a little more wiggly. And you've noticed I always said they get the ADHD from me because you can tell through this interview I'm having a hard time sitting still and I'm wiggling. And then you add to that they're boys who inherited that from me. They don't want to sit still. And on top of it, they were very smart. And so they understood things. So, for instance, this particular child, he saw a math problem, let's say long division, boom, like that. He knew the answer. He'd write the answer and he'd be right. But the teacher was trying to make him show his work. And it was driving him nuts. Like, why do I need to do all this work to get the right answer when I know the right answer? And he would start businesses to the point where I kept finding him with all this cash and going, are you stealing money from my purse? No, it turned out he got his dad to take him to Dollar Tree, bought a big, huge bag of pretzels, bought the little snack bags, paid his little brother to repackage it all, factored what he was paying for all of this in, resold each bag for a quarter. And he was making money hand over fist. And the school shut him down. So he started another business drawing cartoons for his friends. Then he started a business doing little origami things. Do you remember those things that fortune tellers or whatever? They wouldn't let him do any of this. They just wanted him to sit in a seat and do what he was told. And it wasn't working very well. And so he was getting into a lot of mischief. He was getting into a lot of trouble. I was being called every day. The school said, obviously, he has ADHD. He might be on the autism spectrum. If I'd had different support, maybe I wouldn't have put him on Ritalin. To this day, I don't know if I was right or wrong. I really don't. And I may have been wrong. But on top of that, I was also getting a lot of pressure from my parents. Oh, look how horribly behaved this child is. You need to crack down on him. You need to be tougher. You need to discipline him more. And I was at the point where I'm disciplining him up to the line. You don't cross some lines, not for any reason. And I'm not going to cross that line. But when you're getting that kind of pressure, being told you're a terrible parent, the school wasn't telling me that. They knew I was going to be there to deal with him if I needed to be. But I was getting it from my parents and I think from my sisters. Well, that's more pressure. Here's a pill that maybe if you give it to him, maybe you won't have everyone telling you you're a bad parent. So that kind of thing doesn't help. And I don't know, is Ritalin being used as much today, or have doctors and parents sort of slacked off that? Do you know?
I think it's still fairly common diagnosis. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know the medications that they're giving now. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure about the medications. I
Yeah.
do know the diagnosis is alive and well.
Okay. And in retrospect, maybe I would have tried to do more research. Again, I don't know if it was the right thing or the wrong thing, but I think that probably it is overprescribed for kids who are just squirrely little boys. They just have energy.
So, how old was he at the time?
I believe he was about fourth grade when he started on it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, the educational system definitely has some room to grow to accommodate the needs of our little boys. Like that's,
Mhm.
yeah, that's
Well, I think they need to be outdoors more, and that's something 15 years ago. I'm not sure what I would have said about that, but I do. And part of how my thinking has sort of evolved as I experience boys. I grew up with all sisters. My parents were not into sports at all. In fact, my mom hated what she called jocks and cheerleaders. So I was actually kind of scared of athletes. And I had this wrong attitude about them because of what I had been told growing up. And so it never occurred to me really to put my boys in sports. One of my older sons was early on, and that didn't work out so well. So we just kind of never went back to it until the boys started expressing, I want to be on the church softball team. I want to be on the school track team. And so, especially the younger ones followed their older brother's lead. And I think they really got the benefit of their older brothers leading the way, where I wish that I had known how important sports are, especially to boys. I think they're great for boys or girls, but I think for boys especially, it's almost necessary.
yeah,
Not for every boy. There are some who aren't going to like sports, but largely, I think they're very important.
well, and I think there are so many choices. Like it doesn't, excuse me, it doesn't have to be the baseball team, the soccer team, like the traditional
Right.
ones. There, I think the core of that is that they need physical activity. Like their
Yes.
brains
Mm-hmm.
work better when they have the physical activity. And the school
Right.
environment is reducing any type of physical activity. So it makes it even more challenging, especially for our younger
Right.
boys. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely something there. There's something I wanted to ask you about because, like, when we raised our child, we there were some interesting things about expectations and different ways of parenting connected with me coming from Canada and my history coming in on that, and my husband being from Japan and his history coming in from that. So I was wondering, was there any kind of those cultural influences that really marked how you and your ex-husband with the Irish background, was there any differences, like as far as the expectations for boys and girls, anything around communication or discipline or any of that that was part of your world then?
That's it's hard to separate out what was Irish culture versus what was him in particular. So people joke about being on Irish time, which essentially means in Ireland, they're just not as concerned about being punctual. For me, I'm a musician. If you're not there 15 minutes early, you are late. And if you show up on time while the concert's starting and you're not there, now you're fired. So, and even now, I haven't really performed in maybe 15, 20 years, probably more like 25, come to think of it. I just haven't done a lot of performing. And yet, that is so ingrained in me. Even today, I'll sometimes show up to something 20 minutes early and like, this is rude. You can't walk into someone's house 20 minutes before they expect you. And so I really struggle with being overly punctual, where and it is partly Irish culture, he's just like, yeah, we'll get there when we get there. If we wander into mass 15 minutes late, well, I was drinking my coffee. And we just didn't see eye to eye on that. Now, the kids were raised in America, and I think they got more of my punctuality. It's hard to say. Ireland tended to be about 30 years behind America culturally. So when I was there, my mother-in-law was a little bit shocked that I wore pants and jeans all the time. Irish culture was still a place where the women put on their skirts and their heels to go grocery shopping. But the kids weren't raised with that.
Mhm.
And so it's like I said, it's really hard to say what was Irish culture and his expectations. I think that he was raised, his dad, I shouldn't say out to sea because that's a phrase, but he literally was out to sea on an oil tanker. And so he was raised primarily by his mother, and for the first 12, the 15 years, his grandmother in the home. So I think there was a little bit of that, this expectation that, well, the mom raises the kids. And
Yeah.
again, is that Ireland or is it his particular background? I can't say.
What was the age range of the children when you started parenting on your own?
I believe that the oldest, I want to say he was about 20, and the youngest was 6. That sounds about right. I think there's 15, 16 years between them. So yeah, about that.
Okay. And like, how did it evolve the father's role with that many children? Was he still
Um,
able to be an active?
yes, yes. And despite the things that led to the divorce, I will always say he was very active and involved with the boys. He did scouts with them. They went camping with the scouts. They did the Pinewood Derby every year. And after the divorce, he actually got an apartment just around the corner so the kids could walk between our houses in less than
Mm,
10 minutes, or between our house and his apartment. And so it was very kind of open door that, officially there was some kind of a parenting plan, but I think fathers are vitally important, especially to boys. Well, they're important to both. And so I wasn't going to stand on, oh, this is my night, they can't
yeah.
go over. It was, you can spend the night at your dad's whenever you want. You can spend the night here whenever you want. You can go after school, whichever place you want to be in. And I think that's something that we did right, that neither of us really stood on this. This is the plan, and this is what we're going to do. Who cares what the kids want? I think parents have to put the kids first as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Um, so you are currently you are a grandmother to
Yes.
three,
Well,
maybe
4.
maybe four, yeah. Um,
Yep.
so I'm curious about when you look at, so are these the three grandchildren, are they from your sons or your daughters?
Um, the 3 are from my second son, and the one who was either born today or is about to be born in the next few
Okay.
weeks is from my daughter.
Okay, that's perfect. So when you look at the three that are already here from your
Hmm.
one son, and you look at his parenting style, what do you see? Like, do you see like similarities? Like, do you notice, oh, he saw me doing that and he's doing it? Or do you look at it and think, I don't know that that's the right, like, what is that like from your lens?
I think that he and his wife are doing an absolutely fantastic job with them. Now, they grew up when the phrase use your words became a thing, and they always talk gentle to your children, whereas I was raised by parents who just yelled at us all the time. So there's a difference in background, and I probably yelled more than he does, but a lot less than my parents did. So I think he had that benefit that he could then take it farther. And you know what? If speaking gently and softly works, that's great. And they're great kids. So the funniest story is my oldest son had been out to visit them. And then he was visiting us, I don't know, a few months later. And he said, "You wouldn't believe how polite those kids are. They are so polite that Henry even has polite tantrums. And I said, that's an oxymoron. That's a contradiction in terms. How can you have a polite tantrum? And he said, you can. He said they were trying to put him in the car seat and he didn't want to be in the car seat. So he was shaking his head and he was saying, no, thank you. No, thank you. And
Uh,
that's how you have a polite tantrum. So I think they're doing a fantastic job. And I'm, again, going back to my parents, I felt like there was a lot of interference, a lot of overstepping their boundaries. I watched my mom slap one of my boys in the face, both hands like that one day. Like, don't do that. I'm not going to do that to my kids, my daughter-in-law. Those are their children and they're doing a great job.
what feels different about parenting today? Like it's really easy to go from how we were parenting and see those
Mm-hmm.
differences. So from your position now, how do you see, because it is different, parenting
Yeah.
today compared to parenting 20, 30 years ago? What do you see as some of those differences?
Well, again, I think there is an emphasis on never raising your voice, never yelling. Um, Mostly, I think that's a good thing. I think sometimes you maybe need to bring across that this is vitally important. I don't know if a kid is about to touch a hot stove or something, or if they're really bullying a sibling, you might need to be a little stronger in how you voice things so that they understand it's important, not to be mean. Um, I guess I don't see a lot of parents close up, and I think a lot of things were changing in the years you and I were parenting. So I think we were sort of almost a bridge, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Today, obviously, a lot of kids are on screens. I think parents are more fearful today, and probably with good reason, about letting the kids just run all over the neighborhood. Whereas when you and I were growing up, we would go out for hours at a time, get on
Yeah,
our
and
bikes,
just
and
be home for dinner. Like that was it. Not where are you
that
going?
was
Who are
it.
you going to be with? Can I
Hmm.
contact you? Yeah.
Right. We didn't have a cell phone. We would just be gone all day. And we could more or less, I can remember, see, I always know when things happen because growing up in the military, your life is segmented. So I was maybe second grade and I would be out on my bike wandering, exploring the neighborhood. There was a development where they were building new houses. So it was huge mounds of dirt and things. I would be out there. I would be visiting whoever I wanted to in the neighborhood. And as I was raising kids, I'm guessing it's the same for parents today. So many mothers are at work, so the kids are in after school programs. Even if you're home with your kids, there are no kids in the neighborhood for them to play with anyway. And so it can be more isolating. And I think that women have really grown up with the expectation it's important to get a career, to be yourself, whatever. And again, this goes back to the stereotypes. We're supposed to defy the stereotype of being a homemaker. Well, I have one daughter who wanted to get her PhD, and she did. And I have one daughter who wants to be a wife and a mother. And so she works in a daycare, and I'm sure that she's very happy taking care of babies all day. But, I felt that myself. I felt like you have to go to college, you have to do something important with your life. And important these days is not defined as raising children when it should be the most important. So now I wanted to go to college. I wanted to play in an orchestra. I'm happy I did, but I also felt that pressure every time it's time to write the class notes for your college magazine. I can't say I had another baby. Nobody's going to respect that. And I hate that society made me feel like that. I felt like I had to say, I did something important. I published a book. Whereas we should say, raising the next generation is important. It's vitally important.
Yeah, we might say that, but we don't put
Mhm.
that into practice. We don't
We
show the
don't act like
respect.
it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One
Hmm.
of the biggest changes that I hear and I, empathize with parents now is I would imagine one of the biggest obstacles to having a large family, besides the career component of our own lives, is there's almost an expectation these days that every minute of the day you're either entertaining or providing entertainment. So you are making sure that your child is, getting the singing lessons and swimming lessons and tennis lessons and some martial arts and maybe some additional, math courses. Like the schedule that, and if you're not doing that, if you're not providing that enrichment, then
Mhm.
you're doing something that you're not doing the best for
You're
the
you're cheating the
child.
kids, right?
Yeah. And the whole idea of, that children are not being given the opportunity to be bored, for one thing, or the opportunity to just play outside, like just
Right.
play. And the expectation that a lot of parents have of themselves I think, has changed. So growing up like with six children, I never remember my mom orchestrating our time, like ever. It was just
Right.
very, very different. So,
Yeah. When I was growing up, I think it was more we did what we wanted to do. I wanted to be in two youth symphonies.
mhm.
I wanted to be in pep band. For a time, I wanted to get back to ballet. So that's what I did. And my mom did drive me to these things because I couldn't walk to them. For my kids, I guess we were fortunate that, well, schools have after school activity buses, they have for, decades. But my kids did live within walking distance of their school. So it was a whole lot easier that they could just stay after for sports. The community center wasn't far. I don't think they really did anything there. But I let my kids pretty much, I did require that they each play an instrument for one
Mhm.
year. It's like, if you don't
Me
like
too.
it, that's fine, but at least give it a try. Now, I wish I'd maybe done the same thing with sports, just try one sport once. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But for the most part, they did what they wanted to do. So I think three of my sons were in wrestling, a few of them were in track. One of them wanted to do football. So he did it on and off for a few years and they enjoyed it and it worked and they could walk to their meets if they needed to, they could
Mm.
walk home after practice, so it worked out well.
Yeah, you said something that kind of hit me, and it was that it was what you guys were interested in, and then your
Mm-hmm.
parents supported that. And, thinking of that, that was the same with us too. If we
Mm-hmm.
really wanted to try something, our parents would
Right,
do their best to be able to give us that opportunity.
right.
Whereas today,
Well,
I think it's switched a little bit.
right. Well, one thing I ran into, and this is all the way back in the 90s when I was teaching a lot of music lessons in the Seattle area. And I had two students in particular that they never got any better. And I kept saying, you have to practice. And they kept telling me, I don't have time to practice. And one day I just was like, okay, this is enough. Kids watch TV, they do this, they do that. Of course, you have time. So I said, fine, let's go through your schedule. This kid started telling me, on Monday, I'm doing tennis lessons. On Tuesday, I'm doing, I don't know, Girl Scouts. On Wednesday, I'm doing Bible study and some other activity. They took me through their week and they literally had one or two activities every single day
Yep.
of the week.
Yep.
And I couldn't see this kid isn't going to reach 15 without having a serious case of burnout. Those parents had those kids so full of activities so that they could get into the right high school and into the right college.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking
Yeah.
you're burning out your kid. That's too much.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've experienced that here. Some Asian countries are very Diligent, maybe is not
There
the
goes
right
the clock
word.
again.
Oh, so okay. Keeping that in mind, keeping me on track. I appreciate that. So, anyway, I'm right at the end of it anyway. So, but before we finish, is there
Mhm.
anything that we didn't talk about that you really wish we had of?
I think a hugely important thing is to accept your kids as they are. Now, obviously not, if they're a kleptomaniac or something, but okay, for instance, sports. I never anticipated having a kid in sports. Like I said, I was told that athletes are kind of scary, mean people, but they wanted to be in sports. Okay, well, let's get them in sports. And I found out these kids on their sports teams are the nicest guys, and they're so polite and they're so respectful. And, if they want to read, if they want to be on the debate team, if whatever it is. I'll tell you some of my twins when they were very little, they're identical twins. And I was on a twins forum, and this was a huge thing. A lot of mothers were very into, I'm never going to dress them alike. I'm going to make sure that they're each their own independent people. Now, my twins are numbers 7 and 8. So I had enough experience with kids to say, you really don't need to worry about that. You would have to force them to be alike, and probably dressing them alike when they're 6 months old isn't going to do that. Kids are naturally going to gravitate toward what they're interested in if you love them and just kind of expose them to things, read to them, and let them know your life is yours. You follow what you want to do. So I briefly put my kids in the schools for the arts, the magnet schools that had opened up. And then I said, you know what, that's my thing. Let them pick which magnet school they want to go to. And some of them wanted to go to the school for the arts. Some of them wanted to go to the STEM school. Some of them went to the International Baccalaureate School. They did what they wanted and they were happy there.
Yeah, that's good advice. Before I finish, I usually ask a question just for fun. So, what would be the title of a movie about your family life? And then what would be a short synopsis?
Well, I actually did start a book called Love in a Snot Greenhouse. And, there's a story behind this. When we moved into our house, when we moved back to Minneapolis, the house, it was bought without me seeing it because I was finishing up my job in Washington State. And we could never figure out what color this house was because it definitely wasn't white. It wasn't really beige. It wasn't brown. Some people thought it was kind of yellow. Some people were like, no, there's a bit of green in there. And one day, one of my kids said, it's the color of snot. And we all looked at it and went, it is. It's the exact shade of snot. And so the book is kind of about the fact that, there were a lot of them. The house wasn't always perfectly clean. It could get loud, it could get chaotic. 8 siblings scared off one of my son's girlfriends because she was an only child. She was just like, I can't handle this. Um, and yet, if you try to love your kids, to think about how things look from their view, to give them what they need in life, and teach them to the best of your ability to love each other, all these external things just don't matter quite that much.
Yeah, yeah. Laura, where can people connect with you and find your books, listen to your podcast? Where's the best places to go?
LauraVosika.com, V as in Victor, Osika, will have links to everything, or you can go directly to Books and Brews, spelled out booksandbrews.net. You will find Books and Brews Light only at YouTube. So it's youtube.com/the @ symbol Books and Brews spelled out. You can find all of this on Facebook. Most of these have Instagram. You can find our farm animals and our garden pictures either at Facebook, Glen Merrill Farms, or at glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com.
Well, they'll be below. I wouldn't remember all those. So, but I will say, I did just after being introduced to you, I did start the first of the series
Uh,
because I
Very
love
exciting.
historical.
Uh-huh.
I love it. I've only just started it, but I love the writing style. I love the
Oh, thank you.
characters that I've,
You don't
starting.
hate Sean?
I know people like Sean, so it's kind of like I wonder what's going to happen to him. So no, very relatable characters, but I like your writing style. I like the
Thank
way
you
that
very
you
much.
craft your words. So I hope people do also take advantage of because there's so many books out there. So I never would have tapped into your book, probably, I don't know,
Hmm.
until I had a conversation with you. And then it was like, oh, I'm going to look up her book and see if that might be something I'm interested in. So
Uh-huh.
I hope that people who hear this for different reasons also connect with you with some just beautifully written work.
Well, they can, and the best place to connect with me personally is at my Facebook author page, which is laura.vosika.author. And that's where I'm most likely to actually get messages and answer them or answer people on comments on my page.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you again, Laura. And I know how precious a parent's time is, a person's time is, and I hope you feel that I've honored that time today.
Wonderfully. And it's been a delight talking with you again.
Well, I'm sure that people will take some inspiration and motivation and just some golden nuggets from this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Be sure to check out Laura's links in the show notes and don't forget to subscribe, share with a friend, and tune in next week for more conversations about raising boys. If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gumbetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.